Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CircuitPython Weekly for March 23rd, 2020. This is the time of the week that we get together to talk about everything CircuitPython and Python related. I'm Katney, and I am sponsored by Adafruit to work on CircuitPython. CircuitPython development is sponsored by Adafruit, so please support them by purchasing hardware at adafruit.com or resellers including digikey.com. This meeting is recorded. We host it every week on Discord, and we are in two places on Discord, the CircuitPython text channel and the CircuitPython voice channel. And both are recorded. So if you would rather not have your voice recorded and still want to participate, that's absolutely possible. We have a notes document that accompanies the meeting, and in it you can put your status updates and hug reports, and we will read them off when we would normally get to you in the meeting. This meeting normally happens on Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Check the CircuitPython Discord channel for any changes in times and links to past meetings. There is also a meeting schedule calendar that is available at a link that I will post. And our goal is to keep that updated with any changes further ahead of time than the previous meeting. The meeting recording is posted to YouTube and is available as a podcast as well. This meeting is held in 5 parts. The first part is community news, which is a look at what's going on in the community with Python and hardware. The second part is the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka, which is a statistical overview of the project. It gives us a look at things by the numbers, and it's a chance just to see how things are going outside of what it is we are actually up to. The next section is hug reports. Hug reports is an opportunity to call people out for doing something good. This section is held as a round robin, where I will start as an example, and then we will go down the list alphabetically and loop back to the top to give everyone a chance to talk. And then the next section is status updates, which is also held as a round robin. Same way, I will start and then we loop around. Status updates is a chance to take a couple minutes and talk about what it is you've been up to for the last week since the last meeting and what you'll be up to for the next week until the next meeting. So tell us what you are up to, tell us projects you're working on, that sort of thing. And the last section is in the weeds, which is an opportunity for more longer form discussions. Sometimes those come out of status updates. Other times you already have an in the weeds topic. If you do, please post it to the notes document. That way we are not waiting around at the end to see whether we have any topics. If it's something that comes out of status updates, understandably, it won't be added until that point. So that's absolutely fine. And that is how the meeting will go. And with that, I think I've covered everything. I will turn it over to Phil for community news.
Okay, hello everybody.
Hello.
How are you? So I will make this really fast. For those of you who don't know, we paused most of our operations here in New York because there is a pause on New York State. We did that ahead of time before it became official today in New York State, but we decided to get ahead of it last week because we thought this would, looks like that's where the math was. So if you go to adafruit.com going forward, because a lot of you are in the community and people ask you, hey, what's happening with Adafruit? So we were deemed an essential service, an essential manufacturing business by New York City. And I'll give you the post here. And for the folks that are working on anything with COVID prototyping, research, development, and then for our specific things that we're doing for the city, we're making face shields and more mass quantities than just 3D printing. A lot of you have probably seen the 3D printed ones. It does take a while because we're a manufacturing facility. We can crank out more with a slightly different design. So that's what's happening right now. Things will change later. So if any of you or any everyone knows people that are scrambling for components. For instance, yesterday we did a same-day delivery order. We were allowed to reopen for a lab that really needed equipment that they normally get from Adafruit, and there's no more left because we're not shipping to our resellers. But we were able to deliver that. So a lot of the things for the ventilator projects, building ventilators, everyone's telling us to do that. We'd love to. That'd be a ways off. But a lot of our components are used for the research and development of many things, including like isolation chambers and stuff. So that's the latest. I'm going to do this big post that I had for our shipping stuff. So here you go. You can take a look at it. So that's what's going on. Things will change. We'll let everyone know all the time. And I have just one giant hug report for all of us, because the way that we're able to continue to function as a business is because of this community. The way we're able to function as a community, with all the things that we can do each week, like this meeting, like continue to work on CircuitPython. The teams that are taking over. So the newsletter, I love doing the weekly newsletter. It's like my treat because there's so much going on. Anne's leading that one up, so give a hug report to Anne. If you have CircuitPython news, Python and hardware news, and I'll be running the newsletter and collecting that from everyone, because I definitely have to divert onto other things for the time being. So thank you everyone so much. You made it possible for us to help the city and continue to pay all of our employees, all of our contractors. That's something special and unique. So give yourselves a hug report as well. So that's all the community news I got this week. For me, I'm off to the next Zoom or WebEx or Google Hangouts or Skype or whereby meeting.
Thanks, Phil.
And then Lamore and I will be in the office in our we don't have bunny suits, but we have a lot of personal protection gear for the people who are asking. We're able to get in and out safely. So thank you for all the people who asked us about that. There's a thumbnail in the chat where you can see some of the things we're doing. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Phil. All right. So there's a few more things in community news that I grabbed out of the newsletter. So I will quickly go through a few of those. Here's a couple links to a Raspberry Pi thermal visual player that combines, oh, it's not copying the links. That combines images from Raspberry Pi camera and the Adafruit MLX 90640 thermal camera using CircuitPython. Thank you. The next one is Pigweed is a collection of embedded targeted libraries. They're an open source for 32-bit microcontroller development released by Google. They address the classic challenge in embedded space of reducing the time from running git clone to having a binary executing on a device and setting up an entire suite of tools needed for non-trivial production embedded projects. Next up, allowing student access to the serial REPL in CircuitPython and Chromebooks can be difficult because they are often locked down. There is a web-based IDE crafted in HTML and JavaScript that allows you to see the REPL. Luckily, due to WebUSB, this is actually possible as long as you are using a modern version of Chrome. There was CircuitPython work to interface an Adafruit clue board with the Elec Freaks joystick bits. There was an image of that as well that I believe was pulled off of, there it is, pulled off of the link. And finally, David Glaude got the Pimoroni blinked working with the Adafruit Clue. It's a little LED board from Pimoroni that uses dot stars, and got that going connected to our Clue board. I believe it's actually designed for Raspberry Pi. So that was excellent as well. And the newsletter that I pulled this from, the draft, can be found at that link. Please, 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 if you have any projects you want to share, if you know of other people working on projects, and there's anything about it, a Twitter post, a blog post, some pictures, and a sentence to go with it, please feel free to let us know either on Discord, or submit a pull request to the newsletter draft as well as an option. just let us know. We are looking for any content from the community, and we would be happy to show off your project. And that is community news. Next up is the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. This is a statistical overview of the entire project. It takes a look at it by the numbers. So this includes the core, all of the libraries, and our wrapper library for single board computers called Blinka. First, we'll talk about the project overall. Then we will talk more specifically about the core, the libraries, and Blinka separately. So overall, this week we had 194 pull requests merged. A lot of those are still the update to Pylint and implementation of Black. But that's why the numbers have been super high the last couple weeks. We had 16 authors. I see some new names here. DK Hawk, I don't recognize. Night Sky SK, Andrea Ma, and Ben Lewis, I believe, are new people. So thank you very much to them, and thank you to all of our previous people who have been contributing all along. Thank you. And we had 9 reviewers, which is also excellent. I'm really happy to see that we have been keeping that number up. The more people that are reviewing, the quicker we get through things, and it's a crucial part of the process. So thank you very much for that. And we had 16 issues closed by 7 people and 9 opened by 7 people. So we are down a bit on issues overall. So overall, we have released 5.0 stable, and so far it's been quite stable, which is excellent. We haven't really, as far as I know, run into any issues. And we are currently working on doing our next release, which I believe is centered around Microlab. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that'll be super exciting to get that included as well. But we wanted to wait to make sure that we were doing that right, and that's why it wasn't included in 5.0. Please update to 5.0 and continue to test it out on all of your projects and let us know if you run into any bugs, because we want to make sure that we're fixing anything that comes up. And that's really the case with any release we do. But it's really important to update to the latest stable version at any point in time. And right now that's 5.0. As for the libraries, we are nearly done updating Pylint and implementing Black across the board. That project was big, but went far quicker than I expected, which was great. Thank you to Dylan for that. And once that's done, we will be able to use the newer Pylint on everything. And I updated the using Pylint on, for your own, on your own computer. I updated the guide to include the latest use and how to install it and that sort of thing. So that's there. If you are going to contribute to any of the CircuitPython libraries, please take a look at that guide to make sure that you're able to run all that locally. It saves you a lot of time. And I think that covers overall. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott to talk about the core.
Awesome. Thanks, Kattni.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, core-wise, we had 11 pull requests merged from 7 different authors. Night Sky SK is one of the new folks. DK Hawk is new as well. So thank you to all 7 authors. We had 3 reviewers. As always, thank you to our reviewers who made those pull request merges possible. We have 8 open pull requests. The oldest is 104 days old, which is not bad at all. And the newest is 0 days old. So keep up the good work, everybody, on those. Links in the notes for all the pull requests that are open. Issue-wise, we had 1 closed issue by a single person and 3 opened by 2 people. So we're net up 2 for a total of 267 open issues, with a link in the notes to those issues. We had 6 active milestones. Nothing super interesting here, but there are 0 that are not issued or not assigned a milestone, so that's cool. I believe we still don't have download stats, so that's it for me.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, let's talk about the libraries. So this is across all the CircuitPython libraries. I believe we're up to 221 or possibly 222. We had 183 pull requests merged. And the other two new people, Andrea Ma and Ben Lewis, are amongst the authors. And we had 9 authors and 8 reviewers. So thank you to everybody involved there. In terms of merged pull requests, I pulled the list out of the notes because it was huge. The oldest was 17 days, and obviously the newest was 0 days. So thank you to everybody keeping on top of that. Leaving us with 30 open pull requests, the oldest of which is 441 days, which I believe is a work in progress that has been left to sit. So I think we're probably just going to be closing that one, and that can be reopened if necessary. And in terms of issues, we had 15 closed issues by 7 people and 5 open by 5 people, leaving us net down for 166 open issues. So if you want any of that information, please take a look at circuitpython.org/contributing. As it says, it is a great place to go if you would like to contribute. All of the open pull requests across the libraries are listed there. All of the open issues across the libraries are listed. And a list of library infrastructure issues is available as well, which is us attempting to keep our libraries to a certain standard. And we have a series of checks that help us do that. If you are interested in contributing, reviewing is a great place to start. You can take a look at any code, see whether you find anything. Could be as simple as a typo, could be that you have the hardware and you test it. If you do either of those things, please post to that pull request to let us know. Any sort of testing is always helpful. And circuitpython.org/contributing is a great place to find places to start. In terms of library updates in the past 7 days, we had 1 new library, the DS1841. And we had a 5-page or 5 or 6 page list of updated libraries. Again, I removed it. I did link to our library report where we get this information. So if you're interested in seeing the massive list, there are links in the notes to see that. But I removed it from this set of notes as it was just taking up a lot of space. And with that, I will turn it over to Melissa to talk about Blinka.
Hello, so this is for Blinka, which is our CircuitPython library compatibility layer for single board computers. And we had 0 pull requests merged by 0 authors and 0 reviewers. There are leaving us with 0 open pull requests. There were 0 closed issues and 1 opened by 1 person. There are a net of 37 open issues left, and there have been 3,698 PyPI downloads in the last week, and we are currently supporting 38 boards. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah.
And that is the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. Next up is Hug Reports. Hug Reports is an opportunity to talk about the good things that people are doing in the community. It gives us a chance each week to call people out for the good things they're doing, to be able to let people know that we appreciate something they've done, noticed something that has been done. It may not be something that involved you. It may just be something you witnessed on Discord or somewhere else in the community, and you just want to let them know that you appreciate it. This is held in a round robin. I will start as an example, and then we will go down the list alphabetically. If you're lurking, I will skip you. If you have notes and you are text only and or missing the meeting, I will read them off as I would as if you were in the meeting or alphabetically. And then when we reach the bottom, we'll loop to the top and continue on that way. If you are putting Hug reports and status updates in the notes, please make sure you're putting them in alphabetically, as I will be reading them off alphabetically or calling on people alphabetically. And that in mind, give me 2 seconds to move somebody's updates. There we go. Okay. So I will get started and then we'll move on from there. So first and foremost, I want to give a hug report to Phil and Lamore for their dedication to their people and everything they've done to approach this situation in a well-planned and supportive manner. I also want to give a hug report to everyone on the Adafruit team who is learning new things, possibly for the first time, to handle the work from home situation. You're all doing great, and we, referring to the previously remote folks, are here to support you. I want to give a hug report to John Park for doing the images for my bonsai buckaroo guide. I was unable to get all of the parts, and instead of making me go to a store, John did all my images for me, and that was super helpful because he already had the whole thing set up. To Dylan for getting through the Pyland Black update and implementation. To Foamy Guy for all the support on Discord and help with releases. To Jerry Ann for providing a ton of support on Discord. I'm always scrolling through and seeing Jerry's name as well. To the folks at the PSF and PyCon US 2020 for making the tough decision to cancel. Obviously, there was a lot of thought and so on that went into that, and it was a tough decision to make, but hug reports to them for coming through with that and being able to get that coordinated. Hug reports to the community helpers and CircuitPython helpers on Discord for stepping up to meet the support demands as they increase. The more people that are home, the more people are spending time in our community. And that brings me to my final hug report, which is to the Adafruit community as a whole for remaining supportive and positive as the online community becomes significantly more active. Obviously, the more time that people are spending at home, the more time they're available to be on Discord and discussing things with our community. And everybody has really stepped up and been incredibly supportive. And it's been nice to see. Multiple times I've had people say the Adafruit community is the greatest that we've ever dealt with, or I'm receiving the best support I've ever received. And it's not being given specifically by Adafruit folks. It's including all the people in the community. So thank you very much for representing us in such an amazing way. And King of North is lurking. I believe I saw KGW was lurking as well. So that brings us to Maker Melissa.
Hello, I wanted to give a hug report to PT and Lady Ada for their deep care of everyone who is part of Adafruit. I want for the Adafruit employees who are dealing with such difficult circumstances and adjusting to working remotely. To HHK7734 for adding the Odroid C4 board over the weekend, and group hug to everyone.
Thank you. All right, next up I have lurkers, and then I have notes for Summersoft, who is text only, so I'll read those off. Group hug, stay healthy, everyone. And next up is Scott.
Hello, taking my own time code. First and foremost, thanks, hug reports to all the folks at Adafruit HQ who usually work at HQ, who are now working remotely. They've clearly had their lives disrupted, but we've had some meetings with them online, and it's just been fun, and I'm excited to see everybody embracing and learning all the new remote working skills. Thanks to Anne for taking the lead on the CircuitPython newsletter. And again, if you have CircuitPython related things, MicroPython related things, or just Python related things, please let us know. We'd love to include it in the newsletter. We'd love to get that going, get it more of a community thing. So please help us out. And thanks again to Anne for taking the lead on that. Hug report to Ben Lewis for the improvements to the Max 3186865 PR, adding support for 50 and 60 hertz refresh rates, if I remember right. And then lastly, hug report to Jay Gillick for a new STM board, the Thunder Pack, which is a really interesting form factor. It's basically a board designed around a battery holder for an 18650. So really neat. And thanks for taking the time to not only add your board, but actually adding NVM support to the STM port as well. That's it for me.
All right, thank you. Next up, I have notes for V923Z, who can't make the meeting today. To Jeff Epler for helping out with the test suite in Microlab and for diligently porting the code to CircuitPython every time I modify it. To Jeff once again for his excellent examples using Microlab. This hug has been long overdue. Let it be 2 hugs and a pat on the back. And to Marius450 for his suggestions on the implementation of new functions in Microlab. All right, and next up is Andrew Tribble.
Yep. First and foremost, just a group hug to all, and a special group hug to the folks at Adafruit and anyone else in an area that's impacted by local stay-at-home measures. I know here locally in Kansas City, they're supposed to be going to stay at home tomorrow. So, yep.
All right, thank you. So let's see, lurking. Next up is Charles.
I want to give a group hug to whoever was in shipping the last day, a couple of days before the shutdown, because I literally ordered a couple of things that I really wanted to use, and right before, and I got it 2 days later. And I was very, very surprised that it came that fast. And a group hug and good health to everybody else.
All right, thank you. Next up is Dan.
Okay, so I'd like to thank Phil and Lemore and everyone else at Adafruit for all their careful and conscientious generous things that they're doing for their own employees and for the world, and figuring out what the best thing to do is at each point in this bad situation. I'd like to thank Heyman RL, Plintz, Ali 3021, and Hausler, who's helping me with a lot of reports of what's their experiences in trying to debug the spurious flash write issue that we're having, which might or might not be the bootloader, but there's an issue I put in the notes that points to the current thread of that stuff. Thanks very much to Jeff Epler for getting Microlab ready for release, and also for keeping track of changes that we can make to update our GitHub actions to make them more modern. Thanks to Scott for continuing all the sleep and low power work that he was doing for the past week and a half or so at least. And thanks to Katney, who is undoubtedly disappointed that the tutorial that she was going to run during PyCon has been canceled, and we'll see what happens with that. But thank you for continuing to work even in the presence of all that, as we all have to. And a group hug to everybody. Okay.
All right, thanks, Dan. Dave is lurking, and I have notes for David Gloud, who says, group hug and special hug for Adafruit for what they do for New York and their employees. And next up is Drew.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, but it says you're muted, but that's weird.
I thought it was me too. Anyways, thanks to Lemore and PT for Intel. And thanks to pushing out loader test.
Yeah, Drew, you cut out. I'll go ahead and read your hug reports real quick. Hug to Lady Ada and PT for hosting a mega show and tell. It's great to see global maker community have opportunities to connect and share. And to Sedacious for pushing the app loader experiment for the OHS wrist badge so I could try it out. Next, I have notes for Dee Wester, who is also lurking. Group hug to all for keeping up this system through the hard times. And congrats to Adafruit on the medical services allowance. And next up is Foamy Guy.
For this week, I had Hug for Scott. Got me pointed in the right direction on display I/O screen setup. I was pretty new to that, and he got me going on an issue I was having there. To Shifu again, I got my Pew Pew M4 last week and have started playing with that. It's a super cool device. Definitely can recommend to check that out if you guys are interested in games at all. Really cool device. Katney and Dylan for letting me help out on the Pylent and the Black updates. I'm sure they were happy to get as many hands as they could, but I did learn quite a bit about both Pylent and Black during that process, and also the automation, those little GitHub scripts that were put together. Those are really neat. I actually learned a fair bit from that as well. And then lastly, just a group hug to everyone, and especially those who have had your lives disrupted. And I just personally, I'm super grateful for the positive and supporting community to kind of dip into and get a quick escape here and there from the actual world. So, group hug help.
All right, thank you. Next up, I have notes for Geek Guy, who says, group hug to the entire CircuitPython team for being awesome, and to Jerry Ann, Brent Rue, and Deshipu for helping me figure out that my code is better than I thought and for being awesome and patient with me. And next up is Higher Effect.
All right, so big thanks this week to just everyone on the Adafruit team for their awesome COVID efforts. Working remotely, is something I've been doing for a while. It's a pretty easy transition for me, all things considered, but I know that there's a lot of people out there who, that's not the case for. And for anyone in a city, I just think it seems like they're just doing a really great job of supporting everyone and setting an example for how companies can manage a transition like this. So really big hug to that team. Everybody on there is doing a great job. Thanks to Jeremy G for the cool new addition to the STM32 CircuitPython board list, the Thunder Pack, which, as Scott mentioned, is a board that is pretty much built around a lithium-ion battery, which is kind of a super neat form factor. Very interested to see how that goes. He also found some issues with USB on the STM32 F412. So that's reminding me about some cleanup. So thank you for highlighting those so I can get around to those. And then thanks to Scott for his continuing work on the low power code. I'm hoping to figure out how to merge a lot of that stuff into the work that I'm doing on the STM32 H7 and F7, because it's definitely exciting stuff to get the new low power stuff enabled on all of the new CircuitPython boards. So thanks everyone. Group hug to all others. Stay healthy and wash your hands.
All right, thank you. Next up is Jeff.
Hello. I have a group hug because everybody needs virtual hugs right now. And echoing many others, sending hug reports to everybody who's been thrust into work from home. A number of us have been doing that for a while. Talk to us about it. We don't necessarily have answers, but we can tell you about our own experiences. More topically, hug to Tanut for a lot of helpful advice about display I/O, which I'm working on for some RGB displays, LED displays. And thank you for Dan for past and future help teaching me how to do GitHub releases. With 5.1.0 coming in the pipes, I'm doing some of that. So thank you.
All right, excellent. Next up is Jerry.
Yeah, I'll do a group wave. No hugs for a while. And thanks, Katney, for updating and explaining to me the changes to the Pylent guide and Black and all that stuff. It's actually working really well.
That's good to hear, and you are very welcome. All right, and that is hug reports. Thank you, everyone. Next up is status updates. Status updates is an opportunity for us to sync up on what everyone is up to. Take a couple minutes to talk about what you've done over the past week and what you will be doing over the next week. If we get into any longer discussions, it's possible to move things to in the weeds if that makes sense. This is also an opportunity to give tips and tricks to others if you're blocked and someone else has some ideas or you have any quick questions. feel free to ask those and feel free to offer up help. This is held as a round robin in the exact same way as hug reports. I will start and we will go through the list. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. Last week, I published the guide for the bonsai buckaroo, which is a plant care helper that is designed to work with Clue or Microbit. So that guide is now out. If you are interested in automated plant care, you should check out that board. It makes it very simple. I did fritzing objects for 2 revised boards. We've been trying to update all of our breakouts, I assume anyway, to have stemma connectors on them because it makes them so much easier to work with. And there's 2 that have recently been updated, and so I did new fritzing things for those. Helped Erin St. Blaine with her code for her Burning Lizard staff. It was adapted from a previous project, but there were some things that she wanted to be able to do with it that were a little outside her wheelhouse, so I helped her get those going. I worked with Summersoft to patch the code of conduct across all the libraries. That was a big deal, but that's done. I may have mentioned that last week. I don't remember now. Reviewed and merged all the PRs for the Pilot Black projects. There are still a few that are open, so I'll be dealing still with those. GitHub says 383 for me, 383 PRs reviewed in March, and my quick stats for only the 13th through the 17th of March were 617 contributions. The code of conduct and Pilot PRs were many, many things. There's various things I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting, and I updated to Catalina this weekend, which as of this morning, I regret. This week, updating guides for the 2 boards that were revised, the APDS 9960 and the VL 6810, to include their stemma revision. The guides currently are for the previous revision of the boards, and those 2 will be updated. We updated the testers for the Gemma board, Gemma M0, and so we want to update the default files on GitHub for that. So if people want to be able to download those after they get their boards, they can. There's a few libraries that are not in the bundle that I need to get that fixed up. And as for the Catalina update, I will be providing permissions to the macOS apps for the rest of my life. And that is my status update. 2 people are lurking, and so next up is Maker Melissa.
Hello. So last week I finished getting the Platform Detect guide published. I worked on Blinka guide, which is the follow-up guide for that one. And I started reskinning the dashboard with a new design that I had worked on a couple weeks back. This week I'm going to continue with the dashboard reskin, and I'll probably finish it up, but it's getting kind of tricky. And I'll finish up the Blinka guide because the hardest part on that one's already done. And that's it for me.
Excellent. I have a couple of lurkers, and next up is Summersoft, who is text only, so I will read that off. Last week, libraries finished remaining patches. CircuitPython.org updated its Adabot module, now gives daily report for Pilot version being out of date. Got familiar with Boto 3 and retrieving S3 CloudWatch metrics, spoke with Dan H. briefly about some CloudWatch limitations, and will explore directly accessing the logs via S3 CloudWatch API. This week, some Rosy Pi work to reestablish the test runner, and hopefully get some S3 CloudWatch log examples to further solution for core download metrics. And next up is Scott.
Awesome. Thank you, Katney. I'm continuing the work that I feel like I've been doing forever, which is getting sleep working in all of our different ports. It's definitely like fundamental work. For those of you who don't know, I fixed up the SAMD21 on Monday. I got that working. I found a crash that had been introduced between 5.0 and master, where Trinket M0 just wasn't working. It was safe moding all the time. So I fixed that in a separate PR, so that's checked in. I did presence patchwork and moved it, which just changes the APIs, but still doesn't actually sleep because I there's RTOS stuff in there that I don't understand. So I just like did the minimal work for presence, and then I moved on to STM32. One thing that's really interesting is that whereas SAMD and NRF have different clocks to different peripherals, the STM chips don't. They have basically really large groups of lots of stuff that work on the same clock, which means that the power usage is much higher actually. And so it looks like it's only about a 2x improvement on the STM currently. There's some more work we could do there to make it better, but it's interesting to see different clock structures impact it that greatly. Like when the STM is fully running, it's about 60 milliamps, which is way more than either the SAMD or the NRF. So I'm continuing to work on that. STM's been quite a challenge. Pulse in, I've got to snag a timer like I've been doing, which is pretty straightforward. Copy it from pulse out. The other thing there's a couple other tricky things with the STM. One is like I'm basically moving all timekeeping for time.sleep into the RTC, which is usually or mostly stands for the real-time counter, which is literally just like a number that counts up with some like frequency that's related to the number of seconds that have passed. But the STM32 actually has a real-time clock, which means that when you read it, you're actually reading the date, the month, the day, the hours, the minutes, and the seconds, which means that there's actually math that needs to be done to get back to the total number of seconds. So that's been a bit tricky. And the other thing that's been tricky is that the native low frequency oscillator in the STM is actually 32 kilohertz, not 32.768 kilohertz. Those may seem like random numbers, but they're basically how many subticks you have per second, where 32,000 is 32 times 1,000, which is kind of weird. But 32.768K, which is more standard, is actually 32 times 1024, which means you can just use bit division, which is quicker and more standard and makes more sense. But I've had to kind of rethink how I handle those two possibilities for what the reference clock is, which is unfortunate. It means sub-second timing is going to be a little wonky for the 32Ks, but it'll be fine. Last up for sleep is the IMX RT, which I've looked. It has real-time counters. It has two, which is a bit weird. It looks like it's a standard clock, so it shouldn't be too bad. But one counter runs when the chip is on, and the other RTC runs when it's off. They're in different like power domains, which is interesting. The high-powered one is the one that can actually give me a tick every millisecond, which is what I care about sometimes as well. There's lots of complexity, but it is worth it, I think, to lay the foundation for us to be able to optimize our power consumption. So after STM is done, then IMX will be my last. I will need some help, and I'll let you know probably next week that I just need folks to try different boards and make sure that we have the right clocks and crystals configured, making sure that our timing is what we expect. So you'll hear from me on that. And then we've been seeing folks get the ESP32 S2s in the mail. And so Lamore is going to reach out to Espressif and figure out where the Adafruit bound ones are and if they're getting to New York, when they're getting to New York, and all that sort of stuff. And then one of those will come my way, and we'll basically switch off of whatever I'm doing to get the ESP32 S2 port set up and going, which will be exciting. So that's kind of my longer term thing. So for now, more sleep, maybe some USB mini mixed in if I feel like it, maybe some Tiny Logic Friend if I like it, but I'd really like to finish all this sleep stuff because it's been ages now. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Scott. All right, next up I have notes from B923Z, who can't make the meeting today. Last week, I added ArcTan2 and ARound to Microlab. I'm really glad the request came from the community. And in the coming weeks, I will be working on Microlab internals and try to respond to any comments, wishes from the CircuitPython community. Next up is Andrew Tribble.
One second, let me get back over to my tab here. This week I didn't have a whole lot of time to do a whole lot of development, did some light community support, and then basically just preparation for being shut in for the week. This week, despite saying it a few times, perhaps social distancing will help me focus. I am going to dip into the GitHub repos and start getting my feet wet, helping out there, and then just more continued Discord activity.
All right. Thanks very much. If you need any help at all, please reach out. There is a guide, but we are also available to answer any questions about GitHub. Lurking, and next up is Charles.
Well, I got my Grand Central just in time before the shutdown, and I very much appreciate. I would really like to let Phil and everybody at Adafruit know that I appreciate. That's something I very much appreciate. You really did a snap job in sending the Metro M4 and the Grand Central to me. I would like to thank them, and I'm just going to continue playing around with my drawbar project and see if I can get an easily constructible device. Right now, the way I built it, it's really difficult to get it to work easily. So, wish me luck, and I'll be back next week.
All right. Good luck with that. Let's see. Next up is Dan.
Okay, so several things. There are a bunch of thermometers, like usually advertised as barbecue thermometers. They're available from Amazon, and so I have several of those. And somebody had already reverse engineered these somewhere else on the internet, so I was able to just copy that and understand it. And there's a repo for that now, so you'll be seeing some multi-probe thermometer projects coming up, or you can try it yourself. The library's already in the repo's already in GitHub. Another thing I worked on is that I've been trying to figure out an easier way to write the more straightforward Bluetooth applications, and I wrote a wrapper library for Central and Peripheral that just do one service. They're pretty simple, and they make the boilerplate reduce the amount of boilerplate by a lot. So, and I'll talk about that a little more about in the weeds. And finally, I'm working on still debugging this problem of SAMD51 writing zeros into various places in internal flash on power cycling. And I forgot one more thing. I'm going to be working on pulse oximeter, BLE pulse oximeter. So there'll be a service available for those. The ones I have use the completely standard service, and it should be very fast to get that working. All right.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Dave P is lurking, and I have notes for David Glaude, who is also lurking, so I will read those off. Last week, disconnected from Adafruit Discord because we use Discord for work now, and I use another account for that. BLE Rover, controlling motor from Clue plus bit to Pi, and Ryan Tech motor driver. And there is a link to that in the notes. And then next week, controlling Energini ENER314-IR, IR send and receive from the Clue plus bit to Pi, and other Clue plus bit to Pi such as LED Shim or Unicorn Hat HD from Pimoroni. Dewester is lurking, so next up is Foamy Guy.
Right. This past week, I had helped out with the release for the Black and the Pylon updates. And then beyond that, it was mostly just guide stuff for me. So made my way most of the way through the two meta guides, and then also spent some time looking at a bunch of the recently released ones. So actually got a lot of inspiration from those as well, both for making guides, but also just some cool projects I want to get started on. So was happy to do that. And then for Next week, I'll just be keeping going on the guide that I'm working on, which is for making your first game with CircuitPython. But beyond that, it's just the chat room and everything else. So that's all from me.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Next up, I have notes from Geek Guy, who is missing the meeting. More RFM 69 radio stuff. Start poking at Bluetooth for the Bluefruit LE Spy friend. And next up is Hierophect.
Okay, so this past week, I have been working on a bunch of stuff for the H7 and F7 ports for STM32, which has been kind of one big package that I need to submit as a PR, and hopefully I'll be able to do that soon so that I can start to get some eyes on it and merge it into these other changes, which are going to make it increasingly difficult to merge in if they keep coming in. So I rewrote the package management system for the STM32 because STM32, in contrast to the existing boards on in the NRF and Atmel ports in particular, which sort of have a limited range of form factors. STM has a bunch of form factors, and they love to just switch up tiny little things about them. So like one pin, they'll switch over. So I've written that to be a little bit more flexible about taking in new form factors. I did an overall review of the config settings and the make file for the STM32 port to make it a little bit more generic, take out any direct references to the STM32F4, that kind of stuff. I wrote the new clock settings for the H7 board, which runs at 400 up to 480 megahertz, and it has a lot of clocks, so that was interesting, but generally pretty straightforward since ST provides tools for that sort of thing. I wrote some Python tools to automatically generate pin and peripheral tables for the STM32 MCU series based on either grabbing them from MicroPython, which already has those peripherals in comma separated files, or just copy pasting out of the datasheet. You can just go in and copy paste the peripheral tables out of an STM or an ST datasheet and just paste them into something like a spreadsheet, export that as a comma separated file, and now all of that is automated. So I'm glad I finally got around to that. Probably should have done a little bit earlier, but it'll make importing new SoCs, so new chip lines from ST, a lot faster. And then this coming week, I'll be working on pin definitions for the STM32H743 Nucleo and the OpenMV camera project, which also uses the same MCU as the Nucleo. So those will be the first two boards for kind of this whole big project. I have to add a module restrictor for the H7 and F7 modules, since those are still going to be in development kind of piecemeal. There's some parts, such as the ADC, which are really pretty different. So those are going to, I want to be able to turn things on basically one at a time as I get them working, so that they don't all, I'm not on a separate branch from the core for too long. And then probably hopefully get a PR in this week so I can sync up a little bit with Scott's low power stuff and any of the new board and documentation changes that have been coming in, because I don't want to be away from the main core too long, or the master branch too long. So and after that, probably more cleanup, but generally just more of the same. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you. Next up is Jeff.
Hello again. Last week, I had lots of good progress on this Protomatter library, which is for driving these RGB75 matrix displays, and started working on the 5.1.0 release. This week, I want to get this transition to Actions v2, but some additional roadblocks popped up when I actually submitted the pull request. Just have to work on those. I think there's a problem with getting the tags, and two different pieces of advice I had, neither of them worked. So is there something else that we need to do? That's what I'm investigating right now. I hope this week to make the 510-RC0 release. We'll talk about that in a moment in the weeds, and continue working on Protomatter. First, I have to finish making display I/O work properly. There are just a couple of problems that affect auto refresh, the ability to display the console, and crashing after a soft reset. And then after that, this is only on the SAMD 51 so far. We're going to adapt it to NRF 52 as the second supported chipset.
All right. Excellent. Next up is Jerry.
There it is. Mute button. And I've got to find the document. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Scroll down the right page. So last week, so I finally learned to use Black and updated my local pilot and got more familiar with that, so I could update my the PR that I had done for the RFM 6.9, which got out of date because another merge went in, and that was a good experience. And all seems to work well. That merge is still waiting for someone to get brave enough to try it. So and either approve it or not, or send it back. But if anybody feels so inclined, take a look at it.
Has somebody tested it? That's the reason that I haven't looked, is I don't have the test.
Right, I don't think so. And it's it's not a simple test. Well, I mean, it depends on what we're looking for. If the threshold for testing it is just that it doesn't break the existing guides, then I think anybody can test it quickly to see that it doesn't hurt anything.
Yep.
Whether people need to try out the new features or not, I don't know if that's necessary to get it in there or not.
Right.
So that's
I mean, I would just say it has to be as good as the current implementation.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So my intent was not to break anything. It does. If people were using some of the features for setting the headers, then there are some little tweaks they have to make. They're not using much of the new code, just the way some attributes are used. Those are pretty trivial. But to use the new stuff for doing the ACK packets and all is a lot more complex.
Right.
But and that's going to evolve.
Right.
So if somebody can just take a look and see if it's mostly either make sure that agree with me that it didn't break anything, and second take a look at the code and see if it's at all in the format and structure you want.
Mm-hmm. I'll take a look at the latter.
Okay.
Can you retag CircuitPython librarians on it?
Yeah, I think they are.
Well, I think you made changes since the last time they were tagged.
All right, sure.
Yeah, and that way it'll pop back up for all of us.
Okay. And it's I wouldn't be at all surprised if it needs more work. So don't hesitate to send it back.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right, and that is status updates. Thank you, everyone. It's always great to hear what everyone is up to. And that brings us to In the Weeds. In the Weeds is an opportunity for longer form discussions. We already have 2 topics. If you have an In the Weeds topic, please put it in the notes document while we are discussing the other In the Weeds topics. That way we are not waiting around to see what happens next. So first thing I'm going to do is turn it over to Jeff for the first In the Weeds topic.
So I've mentioned this 5.1 release that we want to do. And my question is, does anybody have any issues to raise about the state of the 5.1x branch before we do an RC0?
Nope.
And if nobody does, then I will be talking maybe with Dan or maybe with Scott about some of the mechanics to make sure I do it right the first time out. But hopefully look forward to that a little later in the week. Thanks.
Did you see I sent you a link to a document I wrote?
I will look for that again.
It's
if that
in
was
your
last week, I've already forgotten.
No, it's in your Adafruit email as of an hour or 2 ago.
All right. I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you.
Okay.
I think the sooner we get out an unstable version, the better anyway, because right now the CircuitPython.org downloads shows 5.0 RC1 is the unstable version.
Oh, yeah. Nobody should have that.
No. All right. Excellent.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to turn it over to Dan for the next topic.
Okay, so one thing I I said as in status is that I've been working on some simple wrappers to make it really easy to write simple BLE apps, just either acting as a peripheral or a central, so that and talking to a single service at least to start with. So there are two really minor issues here. One is whether these wrapper libraries should be a separate library or they should just be an add-on to the basic BLE library. I was kind of hoping to call this Easy BLE, but there's a board with that name, and I'd rather not just generate some confusion. So I could call it Simple BLE, and it could be a separate library, which depends on the base BLE library, or it could just be part of the BLE library. So that's one thing.
My vote would be Simple BLE as a separate library. I think the BLE library, I made the mistake of putting too much in it, so I'd rather split more stuff out of it than add anything.
Right, so we might even eventually split even that library up. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, and then maybe easy not spelled with an E and a Z. Academy points out.
I think I like that simple matches simple IO.
That's one thing I was thinking about too.
And it also means that it's not complex because you're adding the requirement that it's a single service, right?
Eventually it could be more possibly or multiple instances. So,
but it simplifies BLE. That's the goal. So
that's the goal, right?
It makes sense regardless of how many services it includes.
Yeah. So easy is a little less definitive than simple. Okay. Correct. And then the other thing I want to point out, which isn't really an issue, but it is that this library has callbacks in it. Basically, what you do is you say there are three functions that you define. One is when you connected, you get a callback. When there's a loop thing that gets called over and over again, kind of like a loop in an Arduino program, and then there's a disconnected one. And originally I was going to do this with sort of straight callbacks, and you would assign callbacks or pass them in as parameters. But I found an easier way to do it was to actually define a superclass which has default implementations of these operations, which you then redefine. And so it makes it a little bit, it seems to make it less obvious that it's a callback. And I think it's a better, we've talked in the past about whether callbacks are confusing for beginning programmers or not. So I'll present this and as a sort of a straw man and see what people think of it. But I have to get the code into a repo. It's not quite there yet.
Subclassing would be my preference.
Good. Okay.
Let me mute.
Okay. Great. Okay. Interesting that I tried to look up whether there was a name for this technique, and there wasn't really. But that's what it is. It's really callbacks, sort of constrained callbacks by using subclassing. All right. I'm done.
Okay. Sounds like we solved both of those issues, which is excellent. Doesn't always happen within the weeds. All right, I don't have any more in the weeds topics, so I am going to go ahead and wrap this up. This has been the CircuitPython Weekly for March 23rd. Yep, 2020. We are here every week, typically on Mondays. And if that changes, we will let you know. If you want to be notified about stuff about this meeting, you can be added to the CircuitPythonistas role on the Adafruit Discord, and we notify that group about each of the meetings and remind people about adding their status reports and hug reports and status updates rather to the notes document. So you will be well informed about the meeting. This meeting will be posted on YouTube and also podcast services when it's all said and done. Thank you everyone who participated today, and thank you everyone who put notes in who was unable to join the meeting. And thank you to everyone who is continuing to stay safe We are here. If you need people to chat with and you are home, don't go stir crazy. Seek us out. We are available to talk or to help with a project, come up with ideas, for things for you to work on, or even just help you understand how to work from home. So don't be afraid to reach out. And with that, thank you again, everyone who participated, and we will talk to you all next week.